I'm going to take us to 1912, Luke. I'm going to take us to a woman climbing into a lifeboat in the North Atlantic where she's holding a stranger's baby until dawn. She'd already survived a ship collision the year before, and 4 years later, she would jump from a sinking hospital ship in the Aegean Sea and survive again. Is she the luckiest or unluckiest woman in history? Her name was Violet Jessop, and history called her Miss Unsinkable.
Oh, wow. Well, this is just further evidence that we should just never get on boats.
I know.
Don't mess with the sea.
I probably should. Yeah, you're always on a boat trying to go to a far-flung place. So
maybe
this isn't the story for you. Although, as I say, this is a real half glass full or half glass empty kind of tale.
Okay. I trust you. I've got I'm always confused as to whether I should try and find out from you what your story is for my little amuse-bouche later. Yeah. Should there be some kind of theme? It is completely separate, very much on dry land, very much beach-based. Is what I'll be telling you about later on.
That does feel almost thematically linked then, so maybe we were thinking the same way. Yeah. I mean, people may not know in the production of this show, but we truly do not prepare and tell each other. We prepare solo and then can truly surprise one another because we probably both have a bit of an ick when people feign surprise in podcasts, And
also makes it more interesting for us.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado, I can get into the story of Violet.
Go on. So you said we're in 1912 and we are where?
Well, we were on a ship in the sea, but I'm going to take you back to where she was born. So Violet Jessop was born October 2nd, 1887, near Bahia Blanca in Argentina. Her parents were Irish immigrants who had emigrated to South America to raise sheep. And she was one of 9 children, though obviously many of the children died, as they did at that time in the late 19th century. But Violet, it seemed always to be courting death. She became seriously ill with tuberculosis. Doctors reportedly believed she had very little chance of surviving, but she recovered. And it's worth noting this detail because her remarkable survival story arguably began long before the ships that we're going to get into. Because when her father died, the family had struggled financially. Her mother eventually found work as a stewardess for the Royal Mail Line, one of the few forms of employment available to women at the time. And they offered accommodation as well as wages. But when her mother became ill, Violet, still in her early 20s, decided to apply for the same kind of work. So she followed her mother into that career.
And when you say Royal Mail Line, you mean like a sort of ship that is taking the post
that's
here, there and everywhere?
I learned the other day about Americans used to have it was like a horse relay where that was the fastest way to get mail across the country. So from west to the east. And so and it was one of the most dangerous jobs you could have because you'd run, give them the bundle of mail and they'd charge off and people were dying all the time. I think it was called is it the Pony Express or something?
No, but it should be.
I think I made it a lot more camp than it was.
The Pony Express. Make a lot better film than the Polar Express. But also, people who have read Hamnet about Will Shakespeare and his wife Anne Hathaway and, what befalls their child, a lot of that is sort of letters given to people who are riding into London or coming back this way and how dangerous that is. Yeah.
Was her name Anne Hathaway, as in, the celebrity actress? Oh.
Exactly.
I thought you were just giving her the name of, Anne Hathaway.
Shakespeare's wife, Meryl Streep.
Yeah, exactly.
No, actually Anne Hathaway.
Oh. Yeah. Well,
anyway, sorry, Pony Express.
Anyway, Pony Express. So working for a liner could sound glamorous, but it's not glamorous. A stewardess was not a passenger. She cleaned the cabins, she made the beds, served meals, and looked after women and children and worked very long hours. The crew would experience the heat of the engine rooms, the narrow corridors below deck, and the kind of exhaustion that comes with being permanently on call. If you've seen Below Deck, the TV show, I imagine it is much more horrendous than that. And
fewer arsey millionaires complaining about their sushi.
Yeah, exactly. And she wrote a memoir later, and she says in that she deliberately dressed very plainly, very dowdy, basically, because employers sometimes worried that younger, attractive stewardesses might attract too much attention. So she would frump herself up, basically. And she did that in the interview and she got the job. So she was off on her first gig. So eventually she joined the crew of the RMS Olympic. Now, at the time, the Olympic was the largest passenger ship in the world. And people called it Unsinkable, which, if you know from your boat history, is a bit of a curse.
Yeah.
So we're going to go now to September 20th, 1911. And the Olympic was leaving Southampton Harbour when it collided with a Royal Navy cruiser called HMS Hawke. And the naval vessel tore into the Olympic side. Passengers were terrified. Fortunately, neither ship sank. And in fact, nobody even died. But the repairs were extensive. The ship barely made it back to the port. And this, if one had experienced such a collision, most people might say, that's it for the ships. I'm not going to work up for the post or the passenger liners.
Yeah.
But the very next year, Violet hops onto a brand new vessel, this time the RMS Titanic.
Oh, no.
Now, people may forget that the Titanic represented the absolute height of luxury again. It was carrying some of the wealthiest people on Earth. Its maiden voyage, again from Southampton, headed to New York, which was partly why I picked this story. I was like, it's a nice British-American link.
If you ever do go to Belfast, can I heartily recommend the Titanic Museum? Sounds boring. It was where it was built in Belfast.
Oh.
But the museum is absolutely sensational, and they go into all of the rivalry between the White Star Line and Cunard, the technology that went into it. There's a whole bit talking about like the interior design of all the different cabins, and they've got some sensational artifacts at the very end of it, like the map of all the first class cabins, which was taken by the maid of an elderly rich couple who stayed and died, but sent their maid off to go and save herself. And she had the map in her pocket. There's a deck chair that was on the Titanic. Anyway, it's well worth it. It's very good.
No, you say it sounds boring. You don't know me at all. I would have heartily gone there without any further recommendation. I thought you were going to say I heartily recommend getting the boat from Belfast. And I was thinking, no, thanks, but I will definitely visit the museum. So the voyage began at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, and Lookout famously spotted an iceberg, and moments later, major impact. Now, at first, people may remember that many passengers were not worried. The collision wasn't very dramatic. Many said they barely felt it, but a number of first-class passengers actually came up on the deck and did notice chunks of ice scattered across it. People were kicking it around, again, kind of like, oh, this ship is indestructible, everything's fine. And I think for that era, we can't imagine how enormous the ship would have appeared and therefore indestructible. But of course, Violet wasn't relaxing in a cabin or hanging out with those first-class passengers. She was working and she was helping passengers keep calm, and she was following the officer's orders. But this is what often gets lost in the popular retelling by who made the big movie?
James Cameron.
That, many passengers didn't want to get on the lifeboats. People thought, it looks safe. I'd rather stay on this massive ship than the little dinghy you put in the water. And they looked small and cold. And so basically crew members like Violet were having to persuade people to get into the lifeboats and say, no, trust me, it's going down. But eventually an officer ordered Violet into lifeboat 16. And just before the boat was lowered, another officer handed her a baby with no explanation. They just said, take this child. And she took the baby and she held it all through the ordeal. And, she was lowered into the dark through the rescue. But when she was on the rescue ship, a woman rushed over, grabbed the baby from Violet's arms, didn't say anything, but just walked away. And I thought that was very mysterious when I read in the memoir, but I assumed that it was the mother rather than just some freak stealing
a random. Oh, dark twist in the story. Well, darker after the sinking of the Titanic.
But I was like, it's amazing that a baby could even survive because,
so cold.
Leo DiCaprio doesn't last 2 minutes.
No. My other cultural recommendation would be having just seen Titanic on the West End, of course, also a smash hit on Broadway. You must have seen that.
So good.
Dramatic retelling of the Titanic story, as told by Celine Dion, who was there. Was explaining that to my dad the other day, because a friend of ours is in it, and he said, and is Celine Dion in the show? And you go, no. actual Celine Dion is not in the show. It's someone doing a very good impression. That would be amazing.
Would be. I mean, I think tickets would be even more expensive. But, you know, Violet says that, you know, when this woman just grabbed the baby and walked away, that it kind of haunted her because she never found out who the woman was or what happened to the baby, but she'd held the child all through the night and obviously felt
no thank you.
No thank you. But maybe no thank you is needed, and maybe the silent relief was there. But I would love to, it'd be great if someone could ever track down that baby. But I don't know if that would ever be possible. So the rescue ship rescued 700 survivors, but more than 1,500 people died in the disaster. And Violet was one of them. Many of her fellow crew members didn't make it. And again, after those two major boating incidents, some might think she'd hang up her boat shoes and stay on dry land, but not Violet. She headed out again because when the First World War began, the HMHS Britannic, which was Titanic's sister ship, built to essentially the same design, was converted into a hospital ship. And Violet signed up to work on it as a nurse for the British Red Cross.
Oh, Violet, no.
So she was getting on there voluntarily. As I say, at this point, I want to ask you, do you think she's incredibly lucky or incredibly unlucky?
Well, sort of both. But then actually, I'm now thinking it's of her own making. Fair enough going on Titanic with all the press around it being so super safe and the height of technological innovation, but then getting on a hospital ship during a war in which the waters around the UK, you know, with German U-boats stalking around, are incredibly dangerous. I think now she's just asking for trouble.
Wow. Victim blaming. No. So on November 21st, 1916, the Britannic struck a mine in the Aegean Sea. And
so she's not around the UK. This is a British ship down in the Mediterranean.
Exactly. And unlike the Titanic, which took approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink, the Britannic went down much faster. The captain attempted to beach the ship, a reasonable decision because if he could get it to shallow water, you know, people would be able to survive. But in the chaos, some lifeboats were launched before the ship had stopped moving, and the Britannic's giant propellers were still turning, and the suction began pulling nearby lifeboats towards it, and many were even destroyed by that propeller. And Violet realized what was happening. She jumped into the sea. The current dragged her underneath the ship. And she later wrote that she struck her head on the ship's keel before resurfacing. And miraculously, she doesn't know how, she survived. She was rescued. She carried on.
Hang up. Point of order. Is this her telling?
I looked it up and there's lots of evidence. So I did look at some other unlucky people. The way I got here was I was looking at people who had survived miraculous things. And lots of them turned out to be BS. There was a chap who said he'd survived like a plane crash, a bomb, being set on fire. And then someone looked it up and said, probably a load of old.
Because I guess in those days, like the Titanic was, such a enormous story. Actually, I did learn in the Titanic Museum in Belfast that the first film about the Titanic was made like less than a year after it happened. And somebody who survived the Titanic was an actress and was in the film. Anyway, clearly a big market if you are a liar of saying, I was on the Titanic. I did this in an era where people would be hard pressed to check.
Absolutely. And lots of, if you look at people who fake their own death, big disasters are often the perfect means to do it, right? You just say, oh, I'm dead, and then you go and marry someone else, or you do whatever you want to do. There was even someone who pretended to be, having survived 9/11. I know there's a big documentary about that. So it continues into the present. But no, I believe Violet's story has been verified, and it's not just reliant on her memoir. But she had an injury. The one injury she had was from that hitting her head on the keel. Because she'd cracked her skull on the bottom of the sinking ship. And reflecting on her years at sea, Violet would later write, "Experience has taught me to lie low in an emergency and let the others make the first rush. Later, when things had quietened down, it was possible to make a more comfortable situation for oneself." So,
wow, that's a great shout.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're on the Titanic where there are very few lifeboats and you would like to be at least someone who had access to a place. But yeah, great. Allow the kind of first flush of panic and
Yeah.
then glide in behind. Cool, calm, and
Exactly.
collected. What with it
To
being your
see-
10th sinking or whatever.
She also says the sea has never been friendly to man. At most, it has been the accomplice of human restlessness. So maybe
Beautiful.
she was a restless woman. So where am I? So after the war, Violet kept working at sea. For decades, she sailed around the world, eventually retired and lived quietly in the English countryside. She died in 1971 at the age of 83. So at the end
Wow.
of that life, she'd outlived tuberculosis, the Olympic collision, the Titanic sinking, a fractured skull on the bottom of the Britannic, and apparently the will of the universe to finish her off.
Amazing.
And, you know, I think I would say that she was, you know, probably very lucky, because I think once you've had that many close things with death, you know, maybe the chances of death do increase. But somehow, combination of coincidence and resilience mean that she managed to survive. So here's to Violet Jessop.
I'm seeing in the film adaptation of this, you a bit like that film, that final Heath Ledger film, which he didn't finish. And so when he went into that dream world, the Terry Gilliam film, they had different actors taking on the role. You could do one of these where you have different A-list celebs we know and love do each different mad survival.
You've heard it here first, Netflix.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be so
Get
good.
Anne Hathaway involved.
Yeah, obviously.
Anne Hathaway on a sinking ship.
You know, imagine if we looked at someone found an old picture of Shakespeare's wife and it was just Anne Hathaway. Maybe she's one of those ghouls who's lived forever. What have you got as the amuse-bouche?
Right, so as I said, this is that was sensational. Thank you. Love a Titanic story. Love surviving against the odds, and any mention of somebody being dragged into a propeller or lifeboats being dragged into propellers.
Yeah, very Final
Nightmarish.
Destination.
Yeah, awful. Mine is actually land-based, my amuse-bouche, and I'm taking you to a beach. Do you know what I mean when I say pétanque?
A game like Boule, where you're throwing it. I think recently there was a murder in France over pétanque. Damn, is that the story?
Exactly. Yes.
Oh no. But you know what? This is perfect, because I saw the headline and I thought, I want to read about that, but I didn't read anything else. So please take me to the land of pétanque.
Settle down. Yeah, so you're right. So it's that game. Looks like what we'd call boules, but it's those steel balls. Someone throws a little white ball and then you have to throw it. And in France, if you've been anywhere in like a small town or village, there is a little boulodrome, and there's lots of old men with flat caps and sort of, they have rags, don't they, where they're sort of like constantly polishing the balls and things like that. It is convivial and it is chilled out. However, as you say, not always. So on the Atlantic coast, there's a resort called Mimizan, and there was quite the rivalry between two pétanque groups. The AFP quoted one local resident after all this hoo-ha saying that there was a mega rivalry between the beach pétanque players and those in town. But the person said, I didn't think it was to that level, because one day witnesses saw an argument break out when the beach lot had turned up at the boulodrome in town because it was a heat wave and they were in need of shade. One local radio station.
You've got to know your turf, though, you know? Rain or shine.
Literally, yeah. The one local radio station talked about an argument starting and punches started to be thrown. And then a 68-year-old man was allegedly hit with a steel metal ball. And they are big, heavy, chunky things, by an 81-year-old in the heat of an argument. And he was struck and moments later died. Some say it was minutes later. One source was sort of saying it was about, it seemed like they might have had a heart attack afterwards. At time of recording, investigations are underway. And I thought that would be sort of like it. That's the maddest thing to have happened to bulls. But actually, when reading around the story, loads of other bull deaths and crimes came up. So in that same beach resort in 2020, a 52-year-old man was jailed for 4 years for stabbing and injuring a 25-year-old in the Boulodrome after an argument. And then going back to 2013, in a different part of France on the outskirts of Paris, an elephant escaped from the local circus by, and this is incredible, picking up a tarpaulin, a big bit of some material, and placing it over the electric fence that was keeping it where it was, and then stepping over the electric fence, then ran amok, got to this Boulodrome and killed an 85-year-old, charging into him with his trunk, knocked to the ground. The guy died. He had been taken off to a hospital in a helicopter, but struck down by an elephant. So
someone saying, Granddad's been killed at the Boulodrome, and then saying, what, did he have a heart attack? Did he fall over? No, an elephant charged him that had known how to disrupt an electric fence. That is, there's a way to go. It's quite a sort of bombastic end, I suppose. But it's
a good anecdote.
It's sad to know that, the sacred world of pétanque and boule leads it to so much violence.
Because it's such a chill game. Have you ever played?
I played many a time on a French holiday with a, cafe. I'm trying to think of what's the
cafe latte?
I was going to say cafe latte is very Italian. An orangina in my hand and a
little glass of pastis.
Yeah, but
don't. It's very dangerous.
Very dangerous. Wow. Well, I hope that they managed to find peace. It's sad that it was about turf as well, because I always had assumed from the headline that it was someone had cheated, because it's the kind of game, you could kick your foot and get the ball as close to the location ball as possible,
But no, it's all about turf. So stay away from boats, stay away from bulls. Before we go, how you're back in New York at the moment, but you've been in LA doing this sort of mystery, true crime bonanza, of which we'll learn about. When actually will we learn about it?
We will learn about it in spring 27. I will be definitely plugging
television.
I know, it's such a slow process.
This was a podcast. You'd be bish, bash, bosh out in a month.
Well, you could talk to that, because my God, you turned that one around so quickly. How is the release gone?
Very good. I've had lots of... So this is the Surgeon of St Helena, the one about the sort of dodgy surgeon in a small British island in the South Atlantic. What's been good, and what happened with Pitcairn, and what has happened with this again, is lots of interesting people have got in touch about this story and about other things.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And actually one person works in sort of the diplomatic world, and they said, you have no idea how much this is being talked about in this kind of world. Because it is a kind of, if you're the kind of person who works the Foreign Office in foreign postings, maybe in overseas territories, these little islands, it's likely you will have worked in many of them. So it is a kind of community and a circuit of people who move around these places. And this person was saying, it's been talked a lot. Anyway, I'm having coffee with them Wednesday.
Oh my God, it's so exciting. Well, I can say very little about mine, except that there has been some developments that have been twisty and turny. So I'm very excited to share it with you all. So see you next week.
If you've got any twists and turns of your own, strangely at alwaystruecrime.com is our email address. Subscribe to the series, because then you will never miss an episode when a new one plops out into your feed. And if you enjoy stories about people cheating death on famous boats, or didn't cheat death in a Boulodrome, if you've got somebody in your life who might enjoy all of that, send them a link, send them a screen grab. They might enjoy it too. Poppy, pleasure as always. See you next Tuesday.